Hey everyone, tonight we're slipping back, way back, into the warm, sun drenched lands of ancient Egypt. Picture this: you're scrolling through your social media feed, and a sleek black cat slinks across the screen. Maybe it's a cute reel, a friend's new companion, or even one of those slightly ominous, very dramatic videos set to some spooky music. For many of us, especially if we've grown up with Western folklore, a black cat can still carry a tiny, almost imperceptible shiver of, well, not exactly fear, but perhaps a whisper of old superstitions. Bad luck, witches' familiars, that sort of thing. But tonight, we're going to gently unspool those modern threads and travel to a time and place where the sight of a cat, particularly a black one, sleek and mysterious, wouldn't just be unremarkable, it would be a sign of something good, something protective, something divine, even. We're talking about ancient Egypt, where these creatures weren't just tolerated, they were revered, loved, and sometimes, yes, even mummified by the thousands. It's a world where if you accidentally harmed a cat, well, let's just say your chances of explaining it away is it just ran under my chariot wheels, honest. Were slim to none, you probably wouldn't survive the rather enthusiastic and immediate public disapproval, to put it mildly. The ancient Egyptians took their feline companions very, very seriously. So, before you get cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always lovely to know who's drifting off with these little historical wanderings. And hey, while you're at it, feel free to type in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's fascinating to think of us all scattered across the globe, tuning in for a bit of quiet history. Now, dim those lights, turn on a fan for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing not on a paved street, but on a dusty path, the air thick with the scent of sun-baked earth, the distant aroma of baking bread from a nearby village, and the faintest, unique, slightly marshy fragrance of the life-giving Nile River. The sun, a brilliant, almost white disk in the sky, warms your skin, but there's a gentle breeze rustling the tall reeds along the riverbank, creating a soft, whispering sound. It's a rhythmic shh, almost like nature's own white noise machine. This is the land of Kemet, the Black Land, named for the rich, dark silt deposited by the Nile's annual flood, a gift that sustains all life here. Around you, life unfolds at a pace dictated by the sun and the river. You see farmers in loincloths, their skin burnished a deep brown by years under the Egyptian sun, tending to fields of barley and emmer wheat. Their movements are unhurried, practiced, a testament to generations of agricultural knowledge. Children, sleek and naked in the heat, chase each other with gleeful shrieks near the water's edge, their laughter momentarily piercing the otherwise calm soundscape. Boats with tall, curved prows glide silently along the Nile, their single square sails billowing gently. Some carry goods, pottery perhaps, or bundles of papyrus, while others might be fishing vessels, their nets cast wide. In this world, so deeply connected to the natural rhythms of the land and water, animals are not just background scenery. They are integral parts of life, each with its role, its significance. You see cattle prized for their milk, meat, and strength. Ibises with their elegantly curved beaks stalk through the shallows, and their presence is considered sacred, associated with Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. Dogs are here too, lean and alert, used for hunting and guarding, loyal companions. But we're looking for a different kind of animal today, one that is slowly, almost stealthily, making its way into the heart of Egyptian society. You wander towards a small cluster of mud brick houses. The walls are thick, keeping the interior surprisingly cool. In the shade of a doorway, a woman is grinding grain on a stone quern, her movements rhythmic and strong. And there, curled up on a woven mat near her, almost invisible against the shadows, is a cat. It's smaller, perhaps a bit lankier than the pampered felines you might know. Its coat is a tawny, sandy color, perfectly camouflaged against the desert landscape that borders the fertile Nile Valley. This is the ancestor of our domestic cat, the African wildcat, or Felis sylvestris libica. At this early stage in our journey, perhaps around the pre-dynastic period or the early dynastic period, say somewhere between 3100 to 2686 BCE, these cats are not yet the revered icons they will become. They are, for the most part, still wild, or at best, semi-domesticated. They're drawn to human settlements for the same reason any opportunistic predator is: an easy source of food. And in the granaries and homes of ancient Egypt, that food source is abundant in the form of mice, rats, and snakes. Imagine your small, precious hoard of grain, the result of months of hard labor, the difference between a comfortable winter and a hungry one. Now imagine the constant threat of rodents, nibbling away at your sustenance, spreading disease. It's a serious problem. And then into this picture slinks the cat. Silent, efficient, a natural born hunter. You might initially be wary of this wild creature, but you soon notice something remarkable. Where the cat patrols, the rodent population plummets. Your grain is safer, your home is cleaner, freer of pests. This is an animal that earns its keep, not through brute strength like an ox or through obvious companionship like a dog, but through a subtle, invaluable service. This practical benefit is the mainstream historical fact of their early integration. Cats were, first and foremost, excellent pest controllers. You watch as the cat near the doorway lazily stretches, one eye half open, observing a beetle trundling by. It doesn't pounce. It seems to know its priorities. The woman grinding grain occasionally glances at it, a slight, almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging a silent agreement. She might leave out a scrap of fish or a bit of milk, not as an act of worship, but as a simple encouragement for the cat to stick around. It's a relationship built on mutual benefit, a slow dance of domestication that will unfold over centuries. You probably wouldn't have thought to deliberately domesticate such an independent creature, would you? Most early domesticated animals had clear herd instincts or provided obvious resources like wool or meat. Cats offered something more subtle, a quiet guardianship. As you continue your walk through this ancient world, you begin to notice small signs of their growing presence. Perhaps you see a carving on a tomb wall, not a grand depiction, but a small, almost incidental sketch of a cat beneath a chair, a quiet observer in a scene of daily life. These early artistic representations are rare, but they hint at a growing familiarity, a comfort with having these creatures around. They are not yet gods, not even minor deities, but they are becoming a part of the household, like a silent, furry roommate who happens to be an excellent exterminator. The ancient Egyptians called the cat Miu, or Mao, an onomatopoeic word, likely mimicking the sound it makes. It's a gentle, soft sound, much like the animal itself. You can almost hear it whispered on the breeze. Mayu. It's a simple name, an everyday name. There's no grand title, no complex theological baggage attached to it. Yet, one quirky or marginal detail from this period is how these early house cats might have been tolerated more than actively tamed. They weren't necessarily cuddly lap cats in the way we think of them. They were still quite wild in their instincts. Imagine trying to give a full on belly rub to what is essentially still a wild African cat. You might pull back a nub, or at least get a few good scratches for your trouble. The relationship was likely more one of respectful coexistence. They were appreciated for their skills, and perhaps their sleek, enigmatic beauty was already beginning to captivate the human imagination, but they retained a certain aloofness, an independence that cats are still known for today. It's said that even some early pharaohs might have appreciated a particularly skilled mouser in the palace, keeping the royal granaries free of pests, but this was still a far cry from the divine status they would later achieve. The idea of a cat deity was still some way off. As time flows like the Nile itself, moving from the early dynastic period into the Old Kingdom, the era of Great Pyramid building, the cat's place in society solidifies. They are no longer just tolerated visitors, they are established residents. You see them more frequently now, not just in the humble homes of farmers and artisans, but also in the estates of nobles and officials. They are depicted more often in tomb paintings, sometimes sitting patiently under their owner's chair, sometimes playfully chasing a bird. These depictions are becoming more affectionate, hinting at a growing emotional bond. Historians still debate the precise tipping point. Historians still debate whether their early veneration was purely for their utility, a simple transaction of pest control for scraps, or if there was an almost immediate, deeper spiritual connection being forged. Was it the cat's mysterious nature, its silent grace, its captivating eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets? Or was it simply that they were so darn good at their job that people couldn't help but admire them, eventually elevating that admiration to a spiritual level? It's likely a blend of both. In a world where the divine was seen in so many aspects of nature, the sun, the river, the hawk, the crocodile, it's not a huge leap to imagine that an animal as uniquely skilled and enigmatic as the cat would also eventually find its place in the pantheon. You pause by a canal watching a group of men expertly maneuvering a cargo boat laden with stone, likely destined for a distant construction project. The air is filled with their rhythmic chanting, the splash of oars, and the ever present hum of insects. A sleek black cat, darker than the sandy colored ones you saw earlier, walks with delicate precision along the top of a nearby mud brick wall. Its fur absorbs the sunlight, making it seem like a moving sliver of shadow. There's a certain self possessed confidence in its gait, as if it knows its worth, its place in this world. Black in ancient Egypt wasn't a color of bad luck or evil. It was the color of the fertile Nile soil, Kemet, the color of life and regeneration. So a black cat would have been doubly auspicious, embodying both the feline grace and the promise of abundance. It's a far cry from the shiver of unease a black cat might evoke in later European superstitions, isn't it? You can't help but chuckle softly, thinking how a medieval peasant, terrified of witches, would probably faint dead away if they saw how these Egyptians were starting to treat their Mayu. The sun begins to dip lower, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple. The sounds of the day begin to soften. The farmers are returning from their fields, their tools slung over their shoulders. The aroma of evening meals, perhaps stewed lentils, fish from the Nile, and freshly baked bread, drifts from the houses. The cat you saw earlier on the wall now sits perched on a rooftop, a dark silhouette against the twilight sky, surveying its domain. It's a guardian, a silent protector, a creature of comfort and utility. Its journey from a wild hunter to a cherished companion and soon to a divine symbol is well underway. You feel a sense of peace watching it, a sense of a world in balance where humans and animals share a profound and respectful connection. The air cools and the first stars begin to prick the darkening sky. The gentle lapping of the Nile against its banks is a constant, soothing murmur. The journey of the cat in ancient Egypt is just beginning, and you sense that its most revered days are yet to come. For now, though, you simply appreciate its quiet presence, a sleek shadow moving gracefully through the twilight of this ancient land, a symbol not of misfortune, but of quiet, everyday blessings. And as the first true darkness settles, you think about those granaries, safe and sound, thanks to their silent four-pawed protectors. No wonder they were starting to like them so much. It's just good sense, really. The centuries drift by like sand through your fingers, each grain a moment, an event, a subtle shift in the sands of belief and custom. The old kingdom, with its monumental pyramids reaching for the heavens, gives way to the more turbulent First Intermediate Period, a time of restructuring and regional power. Then comes the stability and artistic flourishing of the Middle Kingdom, a period of refined art and literature, followed by the imperial might and grandeur of the New Kingdom. The age of famous pharaohs like Hatshepsut, the female king who built magnificent temples, Akhenaten, the heretic who dared to worship a single sun god, Tutankhamun, the boy king whose tomb would stun the world, and Rameses the Great, the prolific builder and warrior. And through all these immense sweeps of time, our little friend, the Mayu, the cat, is not just sticking around, it's climbing the social and spiritual ladder with a stealthy, feline grace that is quite remarkable, purring its way into the very heart of Egyptian spirituality. You now find yourself in a time when Egypt is a vast empire, its influence stretching from Nubia in the south to Syria in the north. The connection with cats has deepened from one of simple utility, a furry mousetrap, to something far more profound, a complex tapestry of affection, respect, and divine association. It's no longer just about a practical pest controller earning its keep with a nightly hunt in the granaries. The cat's inherent qualities, its slinky grace, its mysterious independence, its glowing eyes that seem to pierce the veil of night, its surprising ferocity as a hunter of vermin, including venomous snakes, which were a genuine and constant threat in an agricultural society, and its gentle, affectionate side as a companion, especially its tender, nurturing nature as a mother, have thoroughly captivated the Egyptian imagination. They see in the cat a reflection of complex divine attributes, a creature that walks softly but carries a big spiritual stick, so to speak. This is where we meet, or rather become more intimately acquainted with the goddess, who will become inextricably linked with our feline companions. Bastet. Her name itself is thought to mean something like she of the ointment jar, immediately connecting her to precious, fragrant substances, and by extension to protection, perfumes, healing, and preservation. Think of those little sealed jars of scented oils and unguents, valuable commodities that soothed the skin, delighted the senses, and were used in sacred rituals. Bastet, in her essence, embodies that precious, protective, and pleasing quality. Initially, Bastet, or Bast as she was also known in earlier periods, was often depicted as a fierce lioness-headed goddess, a protectress of Lower Egypt, the Delta region, a warrior deity, a powerful force not unlike the formidable Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of Upper Egypt. Sekhmet was the powerful one, who could unleash plagues and fiery destruction, but also possessed immense healing powers if properly appeased. Bastet shared this leonine strength in her early manifestations. She was a guardian who could be fierce and terrible when provoked, a symbol of the pharaoh's power to protect the land and smite its enemies. You can easily imagine her in this leonine form, a stern, powerful guardian, the kind of deity you'd call upon when facing serious threats. Not exactly the cuddly type you'd invite onto your lap for a nap and a gentle purr, though. She was more likely to demand offerings, and you'd be wise to provide them promptly. But as time went on, something fascinating happened. A theological evolution that mirrors the cat's own journey into Egyptian homes and hearts. This is a mainstream historical fact. Bastet's iconography began to soften, to transform. Perhaps as domestic cats became more common, more visible, and increasingly beloved for their gentler, playful, and affectionate qualities, their nature started to influence the perception of this goddess. She gradually transitioned from the imposing and sometimes terrifying lioness into the more familiar and approachable figure of a woman with the elegant, serene head of a domestic cat, or sometimes simply as a cat itself, often depicted surrounded by a delightful litter of tiny kittens. This wasn't a lessening of her power, but rather a shift in its expression, a domestication of divine might, if you will. She retained her potent, protective qualities, but they became more focused on the intimate sphere of the home, the sanctuary of the family. Her domains expanded to include fertility, ensuring the continuity of families, childbirth, where she was a vital protector of both mother and child during that vulnerable time, and even what the Egyptians called women's secrets, those aspects of life and health particular to women. She became the divine guardian of the household against evil spirits, dark magic, and contagious diseases, a sort of ancient Egyptian supernatural fumigator. And beyond these protective roles, she was a goddess of joy, of music and dance, of all the good things that made life worth living. She was the divine hostess, ensuring happiness and harmony. Think of her as evolving from a formidable five-star general to a highly effective, superpowered community guardian who also happens to be a fantastic party planner, a choreographer of joy, and the keeper of the sacred first aid kit, all rolled into one sleek feline form. She was, in essence, the goddess of feeling good and being safe while you did it. Her main cult center, the place where her worship reached its zenith, was the city of Parabost, meaning House of Bastet, known to the Greeks centuries later as Bubastis. Located in the eastern Nile Delta, it was a vibrant, bustling metropolis, a jewel of Lower Egypt. If you were to visit Bubastis, especially during her renowned annual festival, you'd be in for an experience that would etch itself into your memory. The Greek historian Herodotus, who had a knack for observing and recording fascinating details during his travels in Egypt in the 5th century BCE, described the Festival of Bastet as one of the most popular, joyous, and extravagantly celebrated in all of Egypt. Let's imagine you're there now, making the pilgrimage. You approach Bubastis by boat, the most common way to travel any significant distance in a land defined by its great river and network of canals. The landscape of the delta is a lush tapestry of green fields, date palm groves, and shimmering waterways under a brilliant blue sky. The air is already thick with a palpable buzz of anticipation as you join a flotilla of other vessels, all converging on Perbast. Boats of all sizes, from humble reed skiffs to larger, more ornate barges, are crammed with pilgrims from every walk of life. Farmers, artisans, merchants, nobles, their faces alight with excitement. Herodotus tells us these boats were filled with men and women, and the journey itself was part of the celebration. People were singing, their voices carrying across the water, clapping their hands in rhythmic accompaniment, and playing a variety of musical instruments. The women in particular might be shaking sistrums, the sacred rattles with their crossbars and tinkling metal discs, their continuous bright clatter filling the air. This sound was not just for entertainment. It was believed to soothe the goddess, to create a joyful, sacred vibration, and to ward off any malevolent forces that might try to disrupt the festivities. Men would be playing flutes, their reedy melodies weaving through the percussive sounds of the sistrums and hand drums. There's a lot of joyous shouting, laughter, and perhaps some good-natured, even ribald, teasing between the boats as they pass each other. Herodotus, with a historian's eye for curious customs, even mentions that as they passed towns along the riverbanks, some women on the boats would call out to the women of the town, sometimes jesting with them, and some would lift their skirts. A rather cheeky display, perhaps, but it all contributed to an atmosphere of unrestrained joy and freedom from ordinary conventions, a hallmark of Bastet's festival. It's a party on the water, a floating carnival procession, and you can almost smell the sweet scent of date wine and fig beer drifting from some of the more well-stocked boats. As Herodotus dryly notes, they drank a great deal of it. This wasn't a solemn, quiet affair of introspective prayer. It was a vibrant, sometimes wild, ecstatic celebration of life, fertility, and the goddess who embodied these effervescent things. You might find yourself tapping your foot to the infectious rhythm, a smile spreading across your face. It's hard not to get caught up in the collective effervescence. As you draw closer to Bubastis, the city rises before you, a sprawling expanse of mud brick buildings, whitewashed walls, and the imposing silhouette of the temple complex itself. You disembark amidst a throng of people, the sounds of music and celebration even more intense on land. The streets are crowded, vendors hawking their wares food, drink, amulets of Bastet, small cat figurines, and floral garlands. The very air thrums with energy. The Temple of Basset, as described by Herodotus, was a marvel. He considered it one of the most beautiful temples in Egypt, not necessarily for its sheer size or the costliness of its materials, like the grand temples of Thebes, but for its overall design and the pleasure it gave to the eye. It was situated on land that had been raised, forming an island, with canals branching from the Nile flowing around it on three sides, creating a serene, watery boundary. These canals were shaded by sacred groves of trees, likely acacia or sycamore figs, their leaves providing cool respite from the sun and adding to the temple's tranquil ambiance. Herodotus notes a particularly interesting feature. While other temples were often built on high platforms to elevate them above their surroundings, Bastet's temple was set somewhat lower so that as you walked around the city, which had been raised over time, you could look down into the sacred precinct. This offered a unique, encompassing view of the sanctuary within, as if the goddess herself was nestled protectively in the heart of her city. Imagine wandering through the bustling city streets and then a moment of quiet awe as you gaze down into this peaceful, tree lined enclosure, the shimmering waters of the canals reflecting the sky. Inside the temple grounds, and indeed throughout the city of Bubastis, cats were everywhere. And these weren't just any stray cats that had wandered in. Many were considered sacred, living manifestations of Bastet herself, or at the very least under her direct and special protection. They were the pampered darlings of the temple. Dedicated priests and priestesses, the Wab priests, pure ones, and other temple attendants were assigned to their care. Their duties involved more than just occasionally putting out a bowl of scraps. These cats were fed choice morsels of fresh fish from the Nile, creamy milk, and perhaps even specially prepared cooked meats or grains. You'd see them lounging in sunny spots on the warm temple stones, preening themselves with regal indifference to the adoring pilgrims, or perhaps playfully batting at a fluttering insect, all while being treated with the utmost reverence and affection. They were the VIPs, very important pussycats of Bubastis. Harming one of these cats, whether within the temple precincts or anywhere in Egypt, was an almost unthinkable crime, and even an accidental injury or killing could have the direst consequences. Herodotus recounts a chilling story of a Roman during a time when Rome's influence was growing, but Egypt still held to its ancient customs, who accidentally killed a cat. Despite pleas from Roman officials and the clear unintentional nature of the act, an angry mob gathered and swiftly killed the unfortunate man. It's a stark illustration of the incredible depth of feeling the Egyptians had for these animals. It wasn't just, oops, my bad, here's a fine. It was a sacrilege, an offense against the divine order, and the public reaction could be immediate and brutal. You certainly wouldn't want to be that Roman. Talk about a catastrophic cultural misunderstanding. It's a good reminder that what's just an animal in one culture can be a god in another. This profound reverence, this belief that cats were sacred to Bassett and perhaps even her earthly representatives, led directly to one of the most striking and, to modern eyes, somewhat bewildering aspects of the cat cult: the mummification of cats on an absolutely massive scale. When these temple cats or even beloved household pets died, they weren't just unceremoniously buried in the backyard or left to the elements. They were often mummified with a degree of care and attention to detail that, while perhaps not as elaborate as that for a pharaoh, was nonetheless significant. And this wasn't just a few sentimentally preserved pets here and there. We're talking about an industrial scale of feline preservation. Archaeologists have discovered vast cat cemeteries, subterranean galleries, and pits packed floor to ceiling with literally hundreds of thousands. Some estimate even millions of mummified cats. Sites like Beni Hassan, Saqqara, near the famous Step Pyramid, and Bubastis itself have yielded these incredible, almost overwhelming troves of tiny bandaged forms. Imagine, if you will, stepping into one of these ancient catacombs, descending from the bright desert sun into the cool subterranean darkness. The air is dry, still, and carries the faint, uniquely dusty scent of millennia-old linen, desiccated flesh, and natron, the natural salt mixture crucial for the drying process of mummification. By the flickering light of your oil lamp or torch, you see them. Countless bundles, small and unmistakably cat-shaped, wrapped in linen bandages. Some are plain, tightly bound. Others are wrapped with astonishing skill in intricate geometric patterns, using dyed linens of different colors. Some even have faces carefully painted onto the wrappings over the head, complete with almond-shaped eyes, delicate noses, and even tiny, individually drawn whiskers, giving them a semblance of their living form. Some mummies were encased in cartonnage masks or even full body cases, brightly painted with hieroglyphs and religious symbols. It's a staggering, almost surreal sight. A silent, furry army wrapped for eternity. A testament to an extraordinary devotion that spanned centuries. And here's a particularly quirky or marginal detail that makes you pause and perhaps smile at the ancient Egyptians' rather endearing thoroughness and their concern for the afterlife needs of their feline friends. Sometimes these mummified cats were buried with tiny mummified mice or small, sealed pots of milk. The idea, it seems, was that the cat would have something to hunt or a little snack to enjoy on its long journey into the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Or perhaps these were intended as offerings for the cat to present to Bastet in the afterlife, a sort of furry entry fee. It's so endearingly practical, isn't it? Like packing a little lunchbox and a favorite toy for eternity's sleepover. Some cat mummies were even placed in specially crafted cat-shaped coffins made of wood or pottery, sometimes gilded or inlaid with semi-precious stones like carnelian or turquoise. These weren't just treated as dead animals. They were considered sacred offerings, envoys to the divine, or cherished companions deserving of a proper send-off to the next world. You have to admit, it's a level of dedication to your pet that most modern cat owners even the most devoted ones who buy gourmet cat food and build elaborate climbing trees probably haven't considered. Honey, did you remember to mummify a mouse for Fluffy's eternal journey to the field of reeds? It's not typical dinner table conversation these days, is it? But for the ancient Egyptians, it was a serious spiritual business. The sheer mind boggling scale of this practice, millions upon millions of cats, carefully mummified and interred over centuries, naturally leads to pressing questions for historians and archaeologists. This brings us to an ongoing scholarly debate. Historians still debate the exact nature and motivations behind the cat mummification cult. Was it primarily an expression of genuine religious piety, with each mummified cat representing a heartfelt prayer or a thank offering to Bastet from a devoted pilgrim? Did people bring their deceased pet cats to be sanctified and buried in these sacred necropolises? Or, as the demand for cat mummies grew, especially during the late period and Ptolemaic era when animal cults surged in popularity, did it become a highly commercialized enterprise, a veritable industry? There's compelling evidence to suggest that vast numbers of cats were bred specifically for this purpose. Temple catteries might have operated like kitten farms, churning out a constant supply of young cats destined to become mummies. Some studies of cat mummies using X rays and CT scans have revealed that many of the cats were quite young, often dispatched by strangulation or a blow to the head when they reached a suitable size for mummification, perhaps just a few months old. It's a rather sobering thought, a darker side to this devotion. Furthermore, these scientific examinations have also revealed that not all mummies were what they seemed on the outside. While many contained perfectly preserved cats, a significant percentage were, shall we say, creatively packaged. Some contained only parts of cats, a few bones, a skull, while others were even more deceptive, consisting merely of bundles of reeds, feathers, mud, and other miscellaneous materials, all cleverly shaped and wrapped to look like a complete cat mummy. These were, in essence, ancient counterfeit relics, perhaps sold to unsuspecting pilgrims who couldn't afford a premium mummy, or who were simply duped by unscrupulous priests or embalmers trying to meet overwhelming demand or cut costs. It's like buying an expensive designer handbag that turns out to be a convincing knockoff. One can only imagine the disappointment of a devout pilgrim if they knew their precious offering to Bastet was, in fact, a bundle of old rags. The truth is likely a complex and somewhat messy mixture of genuine devotion, economic opportunism, mass piety, and perhaps even a pragmatic way of dealing with large populations of semi-feral cats. For many ordinary Egyptians, offering a mummified cat was a tangible way to connect with Bastet, to gain her favor, to seek her protection for their family, to give thanks for blessings received, like the birth of a healthy child, or to ensure the well-being of their own deceased pet cat in the mysterious realm of the afterlife. The priests and temple workshops, meanwhile, undoubtedly benefited economically from this continuous demand, providing services for breeding, embalming, and selling these sacred objects. It was a divine economy built on fur and faith. During this period of peak veneration, particularly in the New Kingdom and the periods that followed, the cat wasn't just a temple resident or a mummified offering. It was a cherished and ubiquitous member of the Egyptian household. Tomb paintings and reliefs from this era frequently depict cats in intimate domestic scenes. You see them sitting patiently and often very elegantly under their owners' chairs during banquets, sometimes tethered by a delicate leash made of fine linen or leather, perhaps to stop them from filching fish from the offering tables. They are shown wearing collars, sometimes adorned with beads or amulets. They are depicted playing with children, batting at balls, or chasing after birds. In some fascinating scenes from tombs in Thebes, cats are even shown accompanying their masters on hunting expeditions in the papyrus marshes, flushing out birds for the hunters or retrieving downed fowl, much like a modern hunting dog. It's a surprising role, but it shows their versatility and their close bond with their human families. The names given to these cats were often simple and affectionate, frequently just Mew, meaning quite literally cat or meower for a male, or me eat for a female. It's straightforward, much like calling your dog doggy, but it carries an endearing simplicity. Statues of cats, beautifully crafted from bronze, stone, or faience, were common in homes, not merely as decorative objects, but as tangible symbols of Bastet's protective presence, watching over the household. And of course, amulets bearing the image of a cat, or Bastet herself, often depicted protectively with her kittens, were incredibly popular. These tiny charms, meticulously crafted from faience, a glazed ceramic material often in brilliant blues and greens, bronze, silver, or even gold for the wealthy, were worn by men, women, and children. They were talismans for protection against harm, for good luck, and to promote fertility and safe childbirth. It was the ancient Egyptian equivalent of wearing a religious medal or carrying a lucky rabbit's foot, but imbued with the specific, gentle yet powerful aura of the feline goddess. You can imagine children clutching their little blue faience cat amulets for comfort, or a woman placing one on her belly, praying to Bastet for a healthy baby. And what about our sleek black cats during this peak of feline adoration? We've touched on it, but it bears repeating. In a culture where the color black, chem, was so profoundly positive, associated with the life giving, fertile black silt of the Nile, with night and therefore rebirth as the sun was reborn each morning, and the underworld, the realm of Osiris and regeneration, a black cat would have been seen as particularly potent. It would have been a powerful, living embodiment of Bastet's life affirming and protective qualities. Far from being an omen of misfortune or a creature of darkness in a negative sense, a black cat gliding silently through your home, its dark fur perhaps shimmering with an almost supernatural sheen in the lamplight, would have been a profoundly welcome sight. It would be a living, breathing symbol of the goddess's favor, a furry little conduit of her blessings. Imagine the deep comfort that would bring, the intrinsic sense of security. If a black cat chose your doorstep to have her kittens, you'd probably feel like you'd won the ancient Egyptian divine lottery. Free pest control, a delightful new family of fluff balls, and a concentrated dose of divine blessings? Sign me up and pass the mummified mice for when they eventually go to the great scratching post in the sky. The depth of mourning for a deceased household cat, as mentioned by Herodotus, was also remarkable. When a cat died naturally in a household, all the inhabitants would shave their eyebrows as a sign of grief. Think about that for a moment. Not just a tearful goodbye and a burial in the garden, but a visible public display of mourning that would last for weeks until their eyebrows grew back. It's a profound statement of loss, indicating that these animals were truly considered integral members of the family, their passing leaving a real void. You can imagine the quiet, sorrowful atmosphere in a home after the passing of their beloved Mau or Mit. The freshly shorn eyebrows of each family member, a constant visible reminder of the furry companion who was no longer there, purring by the hearth or chasing dust bunnies in a sunbeam. It makes our modern day pet bereavement, heartfelt as it is, feel perhaps a little understated by comparison. No one's suggesting you need to reach for the razor next time Whiskers goes to the great sunny spot in the afterlife, but it certainly gives you a profound sense of the emotional weight and significance these creatures carried in ancient Egyptian society. So you are now immersed in a world that is utterly saturated with feline energy, from the grand, boisterous temple of Bubastis, echoing with the joyous cacophony of music, song, and laughter during the festival, to the quiet intimacy of a family home where a sleek cat, perhaps a black one, a living shadow of protection, purrs contentedly on a cool, tiled floor. The presence of Bastet and her sacred animal is a constant, comforting reassurance. The very air itself seems to hum with a gentle, purring energy. The soft, almost inaudible patting of paws on polished stone floors, the sinuous flick of a tail glimpsed around a corner, the luminous, enigmatic gaze of those captivating eyes watching you from a shadowy alcove. These are the everyday sights and sounds of a civilization that has truly and wholeheartedly embraced the cat. Not as a mere animal, not just as a pet, but as a conduit to the divine, a furry, four-legged ambassador of joy, fertility, protection, and the life-giving, life-affirming powers of the universe. And if that ambassador happened to be black, its fur the color of the richest Nile earth, then its blessings were considered all the more potent, all the more profound. You feel a deep sense of warmth, of being in a place where these graceful, enigmatic creatures are profoundly understood, deeply cherished, and unreservedly elevated. It's a golden age for cats, a time when their softest meow was heeded, and their contented purr was perhaps the sweetest and most sacred music in all the land of Egypt. The soft, buttery glow of castor oil lamps casts long, dancing shadows as night falls over the sprawling city of Bubastis, and the sacred cats within the temple walls, their duties as divine conduits done for the day, begin their nocturnal prowls, their eyes like polished obsidian or gleaming amber, reflecting the starlight and the ancient mysteries of the Nile. The golden age of feline reverence, with its joyous festivals at Bubastis and its deeply personal household devotion, could not, alas, last forever in its most effervescent form. Like the Nile itself, the currents of history are ever flowing, bringing with them new powers, new beliefs, and profound changes to the ancient land of Egypt. The sun still bathes the land in its familiar warmth. The rhythms of agriculture continue, but the wider world is pressing in, and the status of our beloved Miu, while still cherished, will navigate some turbulent waters. We find ourselves now drifting into the late period of Egyptian history, a time marked by foreign invasions and occupations. The formidable Assyrians had made their presence felt, and then in 525 BCE, a new power from the east, the Achaemenid Persian Empire, cast its long shadow over the Nile Valley. This brings us to the famous story of the Battle of Pelusium, a tale that, if true, is a striking example of psychological warfare and one that places cats, quite literally, on the front lines. This is a mainstream historical fact, or at least a widely reported historical account from sources like Polyaenus, a Macedonian author of the 2nd century CE. The Persian king, Cambyses II, was leading his forces against the Egyptian army led by Pharaoh Psammetichus III. Knowing the Egyptians' profound reverence for cats and other animals they held sacred, Cambyses reportedly ordered his soldiers to carry these animals before them as they advanced. Some accounts say they painted images of Bastet or cats on their shields, while others claim they had live cats, ibises, dogs, and sheep, essentially acting as unwilling, furry, and feathered shields. Imagine the dilemma for the Egyptian soldiers, devout men who had been raised to believe that harming a cat, even accidentally, was a heinous offense that could bring divine retribution, or even a swift, unpleasant end at the hands of their own countrymen. Now, to defend their homeland, they would have to hurl their spears or shoot their arrows directly at creatures they considered sacred, or at least risk harming them. It's a brutal choice. Fight and commit sacrilege, or hesitate and be overrun. You can just picture the Persian generals stroking their beards and thinking, checkmate, cat lovers. It was a rather diabolical, if clever, tactic. The psychological impact must have been immense. While the effectiveness of this tactic as the sole reason for Egyptian defeat is debated by military historians, Persian military might was considerable in its own right. It undoubtedly sowed confusion and reluctance among the Egyptian ranks. Pelusium fell, and Egypt became a satrapy of the Persian Empire. Life under Persian rule brought changes, but the deep-rooted veneration for cats didn't just evaporate. In fact, some argue that under foreign domination, such distinct cultural practices like animal cults may have become even more pronounced symbols of Egyptian identity, a quiet form of cultural resistance. The priests of Bastet likely continued their duties, and ordinary Egyptians still cherished their household felines, perhaps with an even greater sense of holding on to something uniquely their own. Then, nearly 2 centuries later, another conqueror arrived, Alexander the Great of Macedon, in 332 BCE. His arrival was seen by some Egyptians as a liberation from Persian rule. After Alexander's death, his vast empire was divided among his generals, and Egypt fell to Ptolemy Soter, initiating the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of Greek kings and queens, including the famous Cleopatra VII, who ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. The Ptolemies, savvy rulers, largely adopted and adapted Egyptian religious traditions rather than suppressing them. They built magnificent temples in the Egyptian style, patronized the local priesthoods, and even identified their own Greek gods with Egyptian deities, a process called syncretism. The cult of Bastet continued, and cats remained highly regarded. The great new capital city, Alexandria, founded by Alexander himself, became a cosmopolitan hub, a melting pot of Greek, Egyptian, Jewish, and other cultures. You can imagine sleek Egyptian cats, descendants of temple mousers and pharaoh's pets, confidently strolling through the bustling marketplaces of Alexandria. perhaps even rubbing against the legs of Greek philosophers or Roman merchants, completely oblivious to the shifting political tides. Even as Roman influence grew and Egypt eventually became a province of the Roman Empire after the defeat of Antony and Cleopatra in 30 BCE, the deep reverence for cats persisted among the local Egyptian population with remarkable tenacity. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BCE, during this period of increasing Roman presence, recounted a story very similar to Herodotus's earlier tale. He witnessed a Roman citizen, part of an official delegation, accidentally kill a cat. Despite the fact that he was Roman and that Roman officials tried to intervene, an outraged mob gathered and, in Diodorus's words, inflicted summary justice upon the unfortunate man. This occurred at a time when the local authorities were normally terrified of offending their Roman overlords, which makes the incident all the more striking. It shows that the sanctity of the cat was a line that, even for the Romans, was perilous to cross in Egypt. You can almost hear a Roman official sighing, "Look, Quintus, I told you, don't touch the cats." Here, is it that complicated? This leads to a quirky or marginal detail. Roman writers themselves, when they commented on Egyptian customs, often expressed a mixture of fascination and bewilderment, sometimes even disdain, for what they perceived as zealotry or excessive animal worship. Juvenal, a Roman satirical poet of the late 1st and early 2nd century CE, famously mocked the Egyptians for worshiping animals like crocodiles, snakes, and, yes, cats. He wrote, "Numang, who does not know what monsters are revered by demented Egypt? One part worships the crocodile, others tremble before the ibis gorged with snakes. Gilded statues are seen of the long-tailed ape, and whole towns venerate cats." There's a distinct tone of Roman superiority, a sort of, "honestly, you people worship what now?" It's a classic clash of cultural perspectives. While a Roman might appreciate a cat for its practical mousing abilities, and indeed, Egyptian cats were beginning to be exported and valued for this very reason around the Mediterranean. The idea of revering it as a divine being, of rioting if one was harmed, struck many Romans as utterly bizarre and irrational. Imagine a stern, no-nonsense Roman legionary trying to understand why an entire neighborhood was in uproar because someone had accidentally run over a feline. He'd probably just shake his head and mutter about barbarian superstitions. As Egypt became more deeply integrated into the Roman Empire and the broader Mediterranean world, these skilled and companionable Egyptian cats began their global diaspora. They were transported on Roman merchant ships, valued for their ability to protect vital grain supplies from rodents, not just in Egypt, but in ports and granaries across the empire. So, the descendants of Bastet's sacred companions started new lives in Greece, Italy, Gaul, and beyond. Initially, they were likely seen as exotic and highly effective mousers, a welcome addition to any household struggling with vermin. Perhaps some of that Egyptian aura of specialness clung to them for a while. They were, after all, rather elegant and enigmatic creatures compared to the more common polecats or weasels used for pest control in some parts of Europe. But, as with all things, the religious landscape of Egypt and the Roman Empire was destined for another monumental shift. From the 1st century CE onwards, a new faith, Christianity, began to spread throughout the empire. including Egypt. Initially a persecuted minority, Christians gradually gained converts, and by the 4th century CE, Christianity had become the dominant religion. In 391 CE, the Roman Emperor Theodosius I issued edicts that effectively outlawed pagan worship throughout the empire. Temples were closed, their lands confiscated, and ancient rituals forbidden. This was a profound turning point. The millennia-old traditional Egyptian religion, with its vast pantheon of gods and goddesses, including the beloved Bastet, began to fade. What happened to the sacred cats of Bubastis and other temples? Their divine status was officially revoked. The cults dwindled and eventually disappeared. While people in Egypt likely continued to keep cats as pets and mousers out of long-standing habit and affection, the formal, state-sponsored worship, the mummification industry, the grand festivals, all these came to an end. The temples fell silent or were converted into churches or quarries for building materials. It's a rather melancholy thought, the last priests of Bastet performing their rituals in secret, the last sacred cats living out their days in a temple now officially defunct, the ancient knowledge and traditions slowly slipping into oblivion. You can imagine an old Egyptian woman, perhaps, still quietly leaving a saucer of milk on her doorstep for the neighborhood cats. A faint echo of a reverence too deep to be entirely extinguished by imperial decree. And this brings us to the great, ironic, and rather tragic misunderstanding, the part of our story that explains why the video's title highlights that black cats were surprisingly symbols of good luck, not omens. As cats, including black ones, spread from Egypt into Europe, their fortunes long-term took a dramatic and unfortunate downturn, particularly during the Middle Ages. How did an animal so revered in one great ancient civilization become a symbol of evil and misfortune in another? It's a complex process, but several factors contributed. As Christianity consolidated its power in Europe, it often sought to demonize or suppress pre-Christian beliefs and deities. Some pagan goddesses, like the Norse Freya, were associated with cats. Her chariot was said to be pulled by two large cats. As these deities were recast as demonic or malevolent by the church, their associated animals sometimes suffered a similar fate. The cat's natural behaviors also played a part. Their nocturnal habits, their silent, stealthy movements, their eyes that glow eerily in the dark, their seeming independence and aloofness, all these qualities, which the Egyptians found mysterious and divine, could be interpreted as sinister, uncanny, or untrustworthy by a different cultural lens. A creature that roams the night, sees in the dark, and doesn't always come when called? Clearly, it must be up to no good, perhaps consorting with witches or demons. That was the unfortunate logic that began to take hold. The black cat, in particular, became a target. Black, in much of European folklore, was already associated with night, death, and evil magic. A stark contrast to the Egyptian association with fertile earth and life. So, a black cat became the archetypal witch's familiar, a demonic assistant in disguise. Accusations of witchcraft often involved a supposed spectral cat. This association was amplified by some church authorities. While there wasn't a single empire-wide decree to exterminate all cats, Influential writings and local persecutions took their toll. For example, the papal bull Vox and Rama, issued by Pope Gregory IX in the 1230s, condemned a supposed heretical cult in Germany that allegedly involved devil worship and a demonic black cat. While scholars debate how widespread the direct impact of this specific bull was on general cat populations, it could certainly reflected and reinforced a deeply negative official attitude towards cats in connection with heresy and demonic practices. It's a sad twist of fate. The very color that signified life and blessings in ancient Egypt became a mark of doom in medieval Europe. Imagine trying to explain to an ancient Egyptian priest that one day people would cross the street to avoid a black cat, or even harm it out of fear. They would be utterly baffled, probably horrified. But it's the color of the sacred Nile mud. It's Bastet's favored hue. Are these people insane? This leads us to another point of contemplation for scholars. Historians still debate how much the deeply positive Egyptian view of cats directly influenced, or ultimately failed to influence, the initial perceptions in other cultures as these animals were exported. Did the Roman appreciation for cats as highly efficient mousers initially carry some faint echo of Egyptian reverence? Or was their value perceived as purely utilitarian from the very start outside of Egypt proper? And why, ultimately, did the positive Egyptian view, which had endured for millennia, lose out so spectacularly to the negative superstitions that took root in Europe and persisted for such a long and unfortunate time? Perhaps the Egyptian cult was too deeply tied to its specific cultural and geographical context to be fully translated. Or perhaps, as new religious and social orders arose, the cat's unique and enigmatic qualities made it an easy scapegoat, a convenient symbol for the anxieties and fears of a changing world. So, as we reflect on our journey, it's truly remarkable to consider the cat's contrasting fortunes. In ancient Egypt, particularly if it was a black cat, it was a living charm, a furry embodiment of divine protection, fertility, and joy. Its presence in your home was a blessing, its image a sacred icon. Fast forward a couple of millennia and travel north, and that same black cat could be seen as a harbinger of ill luck, a witch's confederate, a creature to be feared or even destroyed. It's a powerful reminder of how symbols are culturally constructed, how their meanings can shift so dramatically across time and space. The poor cat didn't change. Human perceptions did. The legacy of the ancient Egyptian cat is a fascinating chapter in the long and complex history of human-animal relationships. Their elevation from humble pest controller to divine being, their integration into the very fabric of Egyptian life and spirituality, stands as a unique testament to their captivating allure. And though their formal worship faded with the ancient gods, the affection for cats, their quiet companionship, and their enigmatic charm have, of course, endured. Thankfully, in many parts of the world today, the irrational fear of black cats has largely receded, replaced by a more appreciative and often adoring view, perhaps a faint, unconscious echo of that ancient Egyptian reverence. We may not mummify them with tiny mice anymore, which is probably for the best, all things considered. But we certainly do pamper them, share their images constantly, and allow them to rule our households with that same serene feline confidence they displayed in the palaces and temples along the Nile thousands of years ago. Some things, it seems, never truly change. The cat, whether in ancient Thebes or modern Tokyo, still knows it's special. And perhaps in its own quiet way, it remembers a time when it was not just special, but sacred. Okay, our long journey through the sands of time, tracing the remarkable story of cats in ancient Egypt, is now drawing to a gentle close. The vibrant festivals of Bubastis have faded into the soft twilight of memory. The whispers of ancient priests have mingled with the desert wind, and the intense gaze of 1,000 sacred felines now softens into the realm of dreams. Let your mind drift from the bustling streets of Alexandria and the grand temples along the Nile. Allow the vivid images of golden amulets, painted tomb walls, and sleek black cats moving through sunlit courtyards to become softer now, blurring gently at the edges like watercolors blending on a damp page. Feel the energy of our exploration subside, replaced by a quiet calm, a stillness that settles over you like the cool, star-dusted desert night. There are no more facts to uncover, no more debates to ponder, only the gentle echo of a fascinating past, a story that has now been told. You can release all the details, all the names and dates, and simply rest in the feeling of having wandered through a world so different, yet so deeply human in its affections and beliefs. The ancient Egyptians found comfort and wonder in their feline companions, and perhaps in recalling their story, we too have found a moment of peaceful contemplation. Allow your breathing to deepen, to slow, matching the unhurried pace of a felucca drifting lazily down the timeless Nile under a canopy of distant stars. Feel any remaining tension in your shoulders, your jaw, your mind just melt away like mist in the morning sun. There is nothing left to do now but rest, to sink into the comfortable support beneath you, and to let the gentle tide of drowsiness carry you towards sleep. The mysteries of ancient Egypt will keep until another time. For now, peace and quiet are your companions.
Hey everyone, tonight we're journeying to a land where history isn't primarily found in dusty books or silent archives, but in the vibrant notes of a stringed instrument, in the resonant voice of a storyteller, and in the deep, rich memories passed down through generations. Imagine a library, not of shelves and paper, but a living, breathing library. A person whose mind holds the chronicles of kings, the genealogies of great families, the laws of the land, and the soul-stirring epics that define a people. We're venturing into the heart of West Africa, into the time of flourishing empires and ancient traditions, to learn about the griots, the esteemed storytellers, historians, musicians, and oral traditions keepers. These were the individuals who were, quite literally, the memory of their communities. In a world where, for many centuries, written records were not the primary means of preserving knowledge, the griot's mind was the most valuable hard drive, their voice the most crucial transmitter. And let me tell you, if your job depended on remembering thousands of names, dates, and epic poems verbatim, with no notes app or cloud backup, well, you probably wouldn't survive the training, let alone a single performance if you flubbed the king's great-great-grandfather's second cousin's heroic deeds. The pressure was immense, and so was the skill. So before you get cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support is like the appreciative murmur of a village audience for a storyteller. It keeps the spirit alive. And please, feel free to type in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always wonderful to imagine this global village gathering for a shared story. Now, dim those lights. Turn on a fan for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing under a vast, star-dusted sky, the kind of sky that stretches endlessly over the West African savanna. The air is warm, carrying the scent of dry earth, distant wood smoke, and perhaps the subtle fragrance of shea butter. The silence of the night is punctuated by the chirping of crickets and the occasional far-off call of an animal. This is a land of immense spaces, of rolling grasslands, scattered acacia trees, and powerful rivers like the Niger, a lifeblood snaking its way through the arid Sahel and the more fertile regions to the south. Long before the rise of the great empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, societies here thrived, built on complex social structures, trade, and a deep connection to the land. In these communities, where written language was not in common use for everyday record-keeping, the power of memory, of the spoken word, was paramount. How do you remember who your ancestors were? Who made alliances with whom? What the sacred laws of your people are? Or the heroic deeds that shaped your village's identity? You rely on those gifted with exceptional recall, those entrusted with the sacred duty of remembering and recounting. This is the fertile ground from which the specialized role of the oral historian, the storyteller, the living archive began to emerge. It wasn't a casual undertaking, not just someone who was good at spinning a yarn around the evening fire. This was a calling, often hereditary, a profession that required immense dedication and skill. We're talking about the individuals known in many parts of West Africa as griots, or jelly in the Mande languages, like Mandinka, Bambara, Diula, Gaulo among the Wolof, or by other names depending on the specific ethnicity and region. The term griot itself is thought to have possibly come from the French griot, perhaps a transliteration of a Portuguese or local term, but gelia, the art of the jelly, is a concept that resonates deeply within the cultures that birthed it. It signifies more than just storytelling. It encompasses history, music, poetry, diplomacy, and profound social wisdom. One of the mainstream historical facts about griots is their absolutely crucial role as genealogists and historians, especially for royal lineages and noble families. In a society where lineage determined status, inheritance, and social obligations, knowing who was related to whom and how was not just a matter of curiosity. It was fundamental to the social and political order. A griot could recite for hours on end the direct ancestral lines of a king, naming each predecessor, their notable achievements, their wives, their children, thereby legitimizing the current ruler's claim to power. Their words were the threads that wove the fabric of social identity and historical continuity. To forget one's history, one's ancestry, was to be lost, adrift. The griot was the anchor. You wouldn't just casually ask your griot to Google that king for me, would you? Their mind was the search engine, painstakingly built and maintained. The training of a griot was, as you can imagine, incredibly rigorous and began at a very young age. Often, a child born into a griot family would learn at the feet of their father, mother, uncle, or another elder relative who was an established practitioner. It was an apprenticeship that could last for many years, even decades. They would start by learning simple songs, proverbs, and short histories, gradually progressing to more complex narratives, epic poems that could take days to recite in their entirety, and the intricate genealogies of numerous families. They had to master not only the words, but also the intonation, the rhythm, the gestures, and often the musical instruments that accompanied their recitations. The kora, a stunning 21-stringed harp lute with a large calabash gourd resonator, is perhaps the most famous of these instruments. Its crystalline, cascading notes could evoke the flow of a river, the sigh of the wind, or the tears of a grieving queen. Then there's the ngoni, a smaller, more ancient lute, often considered an ancestor of the banjo, with a dry, percussive sound perfect for driving a narrative. And the balafon, a type of xylophone with wooden keys and gourd resonators, producing bright, resonant melodies. Learning to play these instruments to a high standard was an integral part of becoming a griot. Imagine spending 20 years just to get the basics down before your first official gig. No shortcuts, no learn Quora in 30 days apps. These weren't just skills, they were sacred trusts. The knowledge a griot held was powerful and therefore sometimes dangerous. They knew the secrets of families, the successes and failures of past leaders, the ancient treaties, and the long-forgotten disputes. This knowledge gave them a unique position in society. They were respected, even revered, for their wisdom and their connection to the past. A king would always have griots in his entourage, not just for entertainment, but for crucial advice, often delivered subtly through a proverb or a historical anecdote relevant to the current situation. "O great king," a griot might say, "do you remember the story of Mansa so-and-so, who faced a similar dilemma with the ungrateful neighboring chief who borrowed his prize-winning goat and never returned it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The ability to deploy the right story at the right time was a hallmark of a skilled griot. Now, for a quirky or marginal detail about their craft. Some accounts suggest that griots employed sophisticated mnemonic devices to aid their prodigious memories. These weren't written notes, of course, but could involve associating parts of a story with specific physical locations, or using complex patterns in music or rhythm to cue different sections of a narrative. Another interesting aspect is the social etiquette surrounding them. In some communities, it was considered extremely bad luck, or at least a grave insult, to interrupt a griot while they were performing or speaking in their official capacity. Their words were considered to be flowing from the ancestors, from the very wellspring of history, and to cut that flow was a serious transgression. You didn't just shout, "Hey, can you skip to the good part?" unless you wanted to risk some serious social blowback, or perhaps even a cleverly worded, very public, and very embarrassing song composed about your rudeness that would be remembered for generations. Griots had long memories after all.
The precise origins of the griot tradition are ancient, predating written historical records about them. This leads to a fascinating area of scholarly debate. Historians and anthropologists still debate whether the griot tradition, or Jelia, emerged from one specific ethnic group or region, perhaps associated with the founders of the earliest empires like ancient Ghana, and then spread throughout West Africa, or whether similar roles and institutions developed independently in various West African societies due to common social and cultural needs for preserving oral history. There are compelling arguments on both sides. The Mande-speaking peoples, particularly the Mandinka, Bambara, and Soninka, have a very strong and well-documented griot tradition, deeply intertwined with the rise of the Mali Empire. However, similar oral historian and musician roles exist in many other West African cultures, each with its unique characteristics and instruments. It's like trying to find the first person who ever told a story, a delightful but perhaps ultimately unanswerable question. What is clear is that by the time the great West African empires began to flourish, the griot was already a well-established and indispensable figure. You can imagine a young apprentice griot, perhaps your age, sitting wide-eyed as their mentor recites the lineage of a local chief. The mentor's voice rises and falls, painting vivid pictures with words. The strings of the ngoni pulse a steady rhythm, a heartbeat underscoring the ancient names and deeds. The apprentice listens, not just with their ears, but with their whole being, absorbing every nuance, every pause, every intonation. They know that one day it will be their turn to carry this weight of history, to be the voice of their people. You walk through a village as the sun begins to set. The heat of the day is softening into a more comfortable warmth. The sounds of daily life are winding down, the rhythmic thud of millet being pounded, the chatter of women returning from the well, the laughter of children playing a final game before being called indoors. From one of the larger compounds, you hear the distinctive shimmering sound of a kora. The notes tumble out into the cooling air, intricate and beautiful like liquid light. Curiosity draws you closer. Peeking respectfully through an open gateway, you see a man seated on a mat, his eyes closed in concentration, his fingers dancing over the 21 strings of his instrument. He is likely a griot, perhaps practicing or playing for his own family, or maybe entertaining a visiting dignitary. The music is complex, with a deep bass line, a flowing melody, and percussive taps on the gourd resonator, all played simultaneously. It sounds like three instruments at once, yet it's one man, one tradition, embodying centuries of artistry. The music seems to weave a story even without words, evoking images of rolling landscapes, bustling marketplaces, and perhaps the distant echoes of heroic battles or royal courts. It's a sound that is both ancient and immediate, deeply rooted in this land and its history. You understand, even without knowing the specific melodies, that this is more than just music for entertainment. It is a language in itself, a way of speaking to the soul, of connecting the present moment to the long, unbroken chain of the past. The griot, even in this informal setting, is a conduit, a keeper of the flame. His presence, his music ensures that the stories, the wisdom, the very identity of his people will not be lost to the encroaching darkness, but will live on to be heard and remembered by the next generation. It's a heavy responsibility, but also a profound honor. And as you listen to those chorus strings vibrating in the twilight, you feel a sense of deep respect for these living libraries of West Africa, these guardians of the spoken word. Their journey is just beginning in our story tonight, and the grand empires they served are yet to rise in our narrative. The whispers of the Korah and the foundational respect for the spoken word that we witnessed in smaller villages now begin to amplify, to resonate on a grander scale. The scattered communities and chieftaincies are coalescing, growing into powerful kingdoms and eventually vast empires that will become legendary throughout the world. Ghana, with its famed gold, Mali, under the illustrious Mansa Musa, and Songhai, a formidable force along the Niger River. As these societies become more complex, with intricate systems of governance, trade networks stretching across the Sahara, and royal courts dazzling with wealth and ceremony, the role of the griot, the jali, doesn't diminish. Instead, it becomes even more critical, more central to the very functioning and identity of these mighty empires. Imagine yourself, for a moment, approaching the capital city of one of these great empires. Perhaps it's Niani, the fabled capital of Mali, nestled in a fertile region, or the bustling metropolis of Gao, a key trading hub of the Songhai Empire. Its mosques and mud brick palaces rising against the brilliant blue sky. The air is alive with a symphony of sounds. The clamor of a sprawling marketplace where merchants from across the desert trade salt, gold, cola nuts, and fine textiles. The rhythmic clang of blacksmiths forging tools and weapons, a sound deeply connected to spiritual power in many West African cultures. The calls of vendors, the braying of donkeys, the murmur of diverse languages. People from various ethnic groups in vibrant robes and intricate hairstyles throng the streets. This is a world of order, of hierarchy, of immense wealth and cultural dynamism. And at the very heart of this power within the royal palace, you will find the griots, their voices and instruments echoing in the halls of kings. The role of griots in the royal courts of these West African empires is a mainstream historical fact, extensively documented through oral traditions themselves, and later by Arab scholars and European travelers who encountered these sophisticated societies. They were far more than mere entertainers for a bored monarch. They were integral cogs in the machinery of state. One of their most visible roles was that of praise singers. Picture the king, the Mansa or Askia, seated on his throne, surrounded by his counselors, warriors, and visiting dignitaries. A griot steps forward, perhaps with a kora shimmering in his hands. He begins to play, the music filling the audience hall, silencing all other chatter. Then his voice rings out, powerful and melodious, reciting the Fasa, the praise song of the king. He extols the king's noble lineage, tracing it back through generations of illustrious ancestors, perhaps even to legendary founders. He recounts the king's personal achievements, victories in battle, acts of great wisdom or justice, demonstrations of immense generosity. He praises the king's strength, his charisma, his divine favor. This wasn't just empty flattery, though undoubtedly a king enjoyed hearing how wonderful he was. Who wouldn't? These praise songs served a vital political purpose. They publicly affirmed the king's legitimacy, reinforced his authority, and projected an image of power and stability to both his subjects and any potential rivals. It was a bit like having your own personal PR firm and a national anthem composer rolled into one, but with centuries of tradition backing it up. A skilled griot could make even a moderately competent king sound like a superhero. Beyond praise, they were the chroniclers and historians of the court. The king's griots were responsible for memorizing and recounting the history of the dynasty, the key events of previous reigns, the successes, and sometimes more importantly, the failures of past rulers. When the king and his council deliberated on a critical matter, perhaps a treaty with a neighboring state, a new law, or how to respond to a drought, the griot could be called upon to provide historical context. O great Mansa, the griot might begin, let us remember how your ancestor, Mansa, so and so, faced a similar challenge when the river spirits were angered. He consulted the elders, made these offerings, and the rains returned. This living library of precedent was invaluable for informed decision-making. Forget a dusty old policy document. You had a walking, talking historical database who could also make it sound incredibly dramatic and inspiring. This naturally led to their role as advisors and counselors. Because of their vast knowledge, their understanding of human nature gleaned from countless stories, and their often close personal relationships with the ruling family, many griots served the same lineage for generations. They were uniquely positioned to offer advice. This counsel was often delivered with great subtlety and skill, woven into an allegorical story, a proverb, or a seemingly casual song. A griot wouldn't usually say, "Hey king, that's a terrible idea and you're going to mess everything up." That's a quick way to find yourself suddenly very unpopular or worse. Instead, they might tell a poignant story about a foolish king who ignored wise counsel and suffered a terrible fate, allowing the current ruler to draw his own conclusions. This indirect approach, the art of speaking truth to power without causing offense, was a highly developed skill. They were, in a sense, the conscience of the court, the whisper of history in the king's ear. Their eloquence and knowledge of customs also made them ideal diplomats and emissaries. When sensitive negotiations were required with another kingdom or a powerful chief, a griot might be sent as part of the delegation or even as its leader. They knew the protocols, the honorifics, the genealogies of the other party, which was crucial for establishing rapport, and they could articulate their king's message with precision, artistry, and persuasive power. Imagine a tense diplomatic standoff being defused not by threats, but by a griot from one side beginning to sing the praises of the other king's ancestors, reminding everyone of past alliances and shared histories. It's a different kind of power politics. One of the most celebrated examples of a griot's profound influence and central role in the founding of an empire comes from the epic of Sundiata Keita, the legendary founder of the Mali Empire in the 13th century. This epic, still performed by griots today, is a cornerstone of Mande culture. And at the heart of Sundiata's story is his own griot, Bala Faseke. This provides us with a wonderful, quirky, or marginal detail that is also deeply significant. As the epic tells it, Sundiata, destined for greatness but initially crippled and unassuming, had Bala Faseke assigned to him as his Jilai from a young age. Bala Faseke was not just his storyteller and musician. He was his confidant, his memory keeper, and his most loyal companion. Later, when Sundiata was exiled by his jealous half-brother, Bala Faseke eventually found himself in the court of Sundiata's great enemy, Sumaoro Kante, the tyrannical sorcerer king of the Sasso. Sumaoro was a fearsome figure who possessed powerful magic and a terrifying magical balafon whose music could captivate or kill. The story goes that Bala Faseke, a master musician himself, dared to enter Sumaoro's sacred chamber and play this magical balafon. Sumaoro, instead of killing him, was so impressed by Bala Faseke's skill and bravery, or perhaps recognized his destiny, that he kept Bala Faseke in his court, effectively making him his own griot. However, Bala Faseke's loyalty remained with Sundiata. When Sundiata eventually rose to challenge Sumaoro, Bala Faseke played a crucial role, not only by inspiring Sundiata's forces with songs of heroism, but also by using his knowledge and wit. He is credited with discovering the secret of Sumaoro's invincibility, that Sumaoro could only be harmed by an arrow tipped with the spur of a white rooster. This vital piece of intelligence, obtained and relayed by the griot, allowed Sundiata to finally defeat the Sorcerer King in the decisive Battle of Quirina. After the victory, Bala Faseke became Sundiata's chief griot, the guardian of his history, and the Kuyate lineage, said to be descended from Bala Faseke, are still renowned griots today. This story beautifully illustrates the griot's multifaceted role: musician, historian, loyal companion, courageous agent, and keeper of vital secrets. He wasn't just narrating the epic, he was a key character in it. It's like if the news anchor covering a war was also the spy who uncovered the enemy's secret weapon. These epics, like the Epic of Sundiata, were the grand narratives of the empires. They were not just bedtime stories, they were charters of national identity, complex historical chronicles, albeit with mythical and legendary elements, and repositories of cultural values, moral lessons, and social customs. Listening to a master griot recount such an epic would be an immersive experience, lasting for hours, sometimes even days, with the audience completely captivated. The griot wouldn't just recite words, they would embody the characters, their voice shifting in tone and emotion, their gestures animated, their facial expressions conveying joy, sorrow, anger, or triumph. And the music, the kora, ngoni, or balafon, would be inextricably woven into the telling, underscoring dramatic moments, providing transitions, and deepening the emotional impact. Imagine the tension building as the ngoni plays a fast, agitated rhythm during a battle scene, or the kora's delicate notes evoking the beauty of Sundiata's beloved Mandi homeland. It was a multimedia performance art. Centuries before the term was invented, the social status of griots during these imperial golden ages was complex and fascinating. They were highly respected for their immense knowledge, their artistic skills, and their unique access to the powerful. Kings and nobles showered them with gifts: gold, cattle, fine cloth, even land, in return for their services and loyalty. A talented griot attached to a wealthy and generous patron could achieve considerable status and material comfort. However, they were also, in many societies, part of a distinct hereditary caste, often referred to as Nyamakala in Mande societies. This term implies a connection to Nyama, a concept of vital life force or occult power. Griots like blacksmiths, wood carvers, and leather workers, other Nyamakala groups, were seen as having the ability to manipulate this power through their specialized craft. In the griot's case, through the power of the word, kuma, and music. This sometimes meant they were viewed with a certain awe, even fear. People might whisper, "The griot knows too much." Their words had the power to build up a reputation or to destroy it with a single, well aimed satirical song, or a strategically revealed embarrassing secret from someone's family history. This power meant that while they were respected, they might also be kept somewhat separate. Griots usually married within other griot families, which helped to preserve the exclusivity of their knowledge and skills, passing them down through their own lineages. It was a closed shop in a way, but one that held immense cultural capital. You didn't just decide to become a griot one day, you were typically born into it, born to carry the weight and the wonder of the word. Their economic well-being was intrinsically tied to the system of patronage. A good griot extolled their patron, and a good patron rewarded their griot. It was a symbiotic relationship. If your patron was a great king, life could be very good. If your patron fell on hard times, so might you. This reliance on generosity could sometimes lead to accusations of sycophancy, of griots only saying what their patrons wanted to hear. This brings us to an important, open, scholarly debate. Historians and oral tradition scholars still grapple with the extent to which griots were objective chroniclers of historical events versus artful shapers of narratives designed to please their patrons, legitimize their rule, or convey specific moral or political messages. How much creative embellishment, adaptation, or selective memory occurred in the retelling of epics and histories over many generations and through many different performers? It's a complex question without a simple answer. On one hand, the core historical information, the genealogies, the major events, often show remarkable consistency across different griot performances and lineages, suggesting a strong tradition of faithful preservation. The very training of a griot emphasized accuracy in these foundational elements. On the other hand, the griot was also an artist, a performer. Each telling of a story was a unique event, tailored to the specific audience and occasion. A griot might emphasize certain aspects of a story, use different poetic devices, or elaborate on particular scenes to achieve a desired effect. So, were they like modern, fact checking historians, or more like historical novelists or playwrights, using the past as a canvas for artistic and moral exploration? The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Perhaps the concept of truth in these oral traditions was less about a dry, literal, purely factual recitation, and more about conveying deeper historical, cultural, and moral truths that resonated with the community and upheld its values. The griot was both a preserver and a creative interpreter, ensuring that the stories remained alive, relevant, and powerful for each new generation. It wasn't just about what was said, but how it was said and the wisdom it imparted. You wouldn't necessarily go to a griot for the exact casualty numbers of a specific battle from 3 centuries ago, but you would go for a profound understanding of why that battle was fought, what it meant for your people, and what lessons it held for the present. And the griot's influence wasn't confined to the gilded halls of the royal palace. While court griots held a particularly prestigious position, the tradition permeated all levels of society. Griots were present at all important life events, at naming ceremonies for newborns, where they would recount the child's ancestry and sing praises for their future, at weddings where they would celebrate the union of two families and offer advice to the new couple through songs and stories, at funerals where they would commemorate the life of the deceased and help to process the community's grief. They were the masters of ceremony, the emotional guides, the social glue. In villages and towns, local griots served their communities in much the same way. They might act as mediators in disputes using their knowledge of history, custom, and genealogy to find equitable solutions and restore harmony. Their ability to recall precedents and family connections often made them invaluable in resolving conflicts over land, inheritance, or social obligations. They were also the primary educators and entertainers for the common people, ensuring that everyone, not just the elite, had access to their shared heritage, their stories, their cultural wisdom. Imagine an evening in a village square, the work of the day done, the community gathered around a crackling fire. A griot begins to tell a story, perhaps a tale of trickster animals full of humor and cunning, or a legend of a local hero. His voice, accompanied by the gentle notes of ngoni or the rhythmic clapping of hands, captivates everyone, young and old. For a few hours, they are transported, connected to each other and to the generations that came before them. This was the everyday magic of the griot. The soundscape of these empires was rich with the music of the griots. The kora, with its ethereal harp like tones, could evoke a sense of spiritual wonder, of vast landscapes, or the delicate emotions of love and sorrow. Its complex polyrhythms and cascading melodies were a testament to incredible skill. The ngoni, with its more earthy, percussive tones, could drive a narrative forward, providing a rhythmic pulse for tales of war or adventure. The balafon, with its bright, clear notes, could fill the air with joy and celebration. These instruments weren't just background music, they were an integral voice in the storytelling, often speaking their own parts of the narrative, engaging in a dialogue with the griots' sung or spoken words. Different musical modes, melodic patterns, or rhythmic signatures could be used to signify specific characters, particular emotions, or to signal a shift in the story. The music was a language in itself, deeply understood by the audience, adding layers of meaning and emotional resonance to the words. It was a truly holistic art form where poetry, history, music, and performance were seamlessly intertwined. You are sitting in the cool shade of a mango tree, the midday sun blazing outside. A respected elder griot is recounting a portion of an ancient epic to a group of rapt listeners. His voice is a well tuned instrument, rising to a dramatic crescendo as he describes a hero's charge, then falling to a near whisper as he reveals a secret sorrow. His kora seems to weep and sing along with the tale. You don't understand every word of the ancient language, but the passion, the rhythm, the sheer artistry of the performance transcends linguistic barriers. You feel the weight of history, the power of tradition, the unbroken chain of memory stretching back for centuries, all embodied in this one remarkable individual and his sacred craft. The empires of West Africa may have been built on gold and military might, but their soul, their memory, was carried in the hearts and voices of their griots. The great empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, with their dazzling courts and powerful armies, eventually followed the path of all empires. They waned, fragmented, and gave way to new political realities. The Sahara, once a highway for gold and salt, also became a conduit for new ideas, particularly the religion of Islam, which began to spread southwards from North Africa through Berber traders, scholars, and Sufi mystics, starting as early as the 8th and ninth centuries and gaining significant traction within the ruling classes of these empires. The arrival and gradual embrace of Islam in West Africa brought with it the power of the written word in Arabic, the language of the Quran. Mosques and Islamic centers of learning, like the famed Sankore University in Timbuktu, emerged, fostering a culture of literacy among scholars, jurists, and theologians. You might think that the rise of a literate tradition would sound the death knell for the oral tradition of the griots. After all, if history can be written down, why rely on memory? But the reality, as is often the case with cultural encounters, was far more nuanced and interesting. For many centuries, the oral and literate traditions coexisted, often complementing and influencing each other. Griots continued to be central to the cultural life of both Muslim and non Muslim communities. Some griots, particularly those associated with Islamized courts or learned families, adapted their repertoires. They might incorporate stories of Islamic prophets, heroes of early Islam, or the histories of local Muslim dynasties into their narratives. Some even learned to read and write Arabic, adding another layer to their already formidable skill set, perhaps using written text as an aid memoir or a source for new material, which they would then translate back into the vernacular and perform in their traditional style. It wasn't a case of one tradition simply replacing the other, it was more like a conversation, a slow interweaving. The core functions of the griot, preserving genealogies, celebrating important events, advising leaders, and captivating audiences with epic tales, remained vital even as the spiritual landscape evolved. Some Sufi orders, for instance, appreciated the griot's musical and poetic talents for devotional purposes, finding common ground in the power of sound and word to elevate the spirit. However, a more profound and disruptive wave of change began with the increasing arrival of Europeans on the West African coast, starting with the 16th century Portuguese in the 15th century, and culminating in the full-scale colonial occupation by French, British, and other European powers in the 19th and 20th centuries. This period brought about immense upheaval. The mainstream historical fact is that colonialism fundamentally restructured West African societies, and this had a severe impact on the traditional systems that supported the griots. The old royal courts, the primary patrons of the most esteemed griots, were either dismantled or stripped of their real power and wealth by colonial administrators. Kings and chiefs who once commanded vast resources and could afford to maintain large retinues of praise singers, historians, and musicians now found themselves subservient to foreign governors, their treasuries depleted. The elaborate system of patronage, which had sustained griot families for generations, began to crumble. Think of it. If your main benefactor suddenly loses their job and their palace, your own position as their official poet laureate and historical consultant becomes rather precarious. Furthermore, the colonial powers introduced Western systems of education, which prioritized literacy in European languages like French or English. These new schools often actively devalued indigenous knowledge systems and oral traditions, sometimes viewing them as primitive or backward. The rich, complex narratives of the griots, the sophisticated poetry, the intricate musical compositions were not part of the colonial curriculum. This created a cultural shift where younger generations, educated in the new system, might become disconnected from their oral heritage. Economic changes also played a huge role. The shift towards cash crop economies, mining, and wage labor drew people away from traditional village life and agricultural rhythms, further disrupting the social fabric and the context in which griots traditionally performed and were supported. Traditional hierarchies were challenged, and the griot's carefully defined place within that structure became less secure. But the griot tradition, nurtured over centuries, perhaps even millennia, possessed a deep resilience, an ability to adapt and survive even in the face of such profound challenges. Griots didn't just vanish when the old empires fell or when the colonial administrators arrived. They found new ways to practice their art, new audiences, and new contexts for their ancient skills. Many shifted their focus from the diminished royal courts to village and community level patronage. They continued to perform at local ceremonies, weddings, naming ceremonies for newborns, funerals, which remained vital parts of community life. They might attach themselves to wealthy merchant families or local community leaders who still valued their services. It was a downsizing, in a way, but the core function of weaving the community together through story and song persisted. This period of adaptation also led to some fascinating innovations. Here's a quirky or marginal detail that illustrates this resilience. As new technologies and social structures emerged, some griots cleverly adapted their traditional skills. For example, with the advent of radio in the 20th century, some griots became popular broadcasters using their captivating storytelling abilities and their trusted voices to disseminate news, public service announcements, or even modern political messages, all framed within a familiar and culturally resonant oral style. Imagine tuning into the radio and hearing not a clipped newsreader, but a wise, avuncular voice, perhaps accompanied by the gentle strumming of a ngoni, explaining a new government policy by likening it to a proverb, or a story about a clever ancestor. It's a brilliant fusion of old and new. Others might compose songs about contemporary events or experiences, the strangeness of a train journey, the encounter with a colonial official, the challenges of city life, subtly weaving social commentary and humor into their performances, keeping their art form relevant to the changing times. They were, in essence, reinventing themselves while staying true to the core of their craft. It's also crucial at this point to shine a brighter light on the often overlooked but incredibly important role of female griots, known as griots or jellimasau in Mandi cultures. While many historical accounts and popular perceptions tend to focus on male griots, women have always been powerful keepers and performers of oral traditions in their own right. Their roles and specializations often complemented those of their male counterparts. Griots frequently focused on women's genealogies, tracing matrilineal lines that were vital for understanding kinship and inheritance in many West African societies. They were renowned for their praise songs dedicated to women, celebrating their achievements, their virtues, their beauty, and their social importance. They composed and sang beautiful lullabies, work songs, and poignant songs for weddings, often focusing on the bride's transition to a new life and offering her advice and encouragement. They were key figures in transmitting moral instruction and social values to young women and children. While male griots are often associated with instruments like the kora and balafon, griots might use different instruments such as the carinyan, a metal tube scraper that produces a percussive, rhythmic sound, or rely more heavily on intricate vocal techniques, clapping, and dance. Their performances could be incredibly powerful and moving, providing a vital space for women's voices, women's histories, and women's perspectives to be heard and celebrated within the community. To neglect the Jellimasau is to hear only half of the story, half of the music. They were and are essential pillars of the tradition. So, what about the griot tradition in the modern world, in the post colonial era, and into our 21st century? It has remarkably endured, though it continues to evolve and face new challenges. After West African nations gained their independence in the mid 20th century, there was often a renewed interest in pre colonial cultural heritage as part of nation building and decolonization efforts. Some governments and cultural organizations made efforts to support and promote traditional arts, including the work of griots. Perhaps one of the most visible legacies of the griot tradition today is its profound influence on modern West African music, which has achieved global acclaim. Many internationally renowned musicians, such as Salif Keita and Rokia Traoré from Mali, Baba Mal and Youssou N'Dour from Senegal, the kora virtuoso Toumani Diabaté and his family from Mali, Sona Jobarte from Gambia, one of the first female kora virtuosos from a major griot family, either come from griot lineages or have been deeply steeped in and inspired by griot musical styles, instruments, and storytelling techniques. Their music often masterfully blends traditional melodies, rhythms, and instruments with contemporary genres like jazz, blues, reggae, and afropop, creating vibrant new forms that carry the ancient spirit to new global audiences. When you listen to the intricate kora playing of Toumani Diabaté or the soaring vocals of Salif Keita, you are hearing echoes of centuries of griot artistry. The griot tradition has also traveled with West African immigrants as they've settled in Europe, North America, and other parts of the world. In these diaspora communities, griots continue to perform at cultural events, teach their skills to younger generations, and adapt their art to new social and cultural landscapes, sometimes collaborating with musicians from different traditions, creating exciting new fusions. There are also storytelling festivals, cultural centers, and academic programs in various parts of the world dedicated to the study, preservation, and performance of West African oral traditions, recognizing their immense cultural value. However, the contemporary era also brings new questions and challenges. This leads us to another ongoing open scholarly debate. Historians, ethnomusicologists, and cultural critics continue to discuss the impact of modern recording technology, the global music market, and broader processes of globalization on the authenticity and evolution of griot traditions. Does the act of recording a performance, for instance, freeze what was once a fluid, ever changing oral art form, potentially fixing one version as definitive and discouraging improvisation or adaptation? Does the pressure of the international music market, with its demand for shorter songs, specific album formats, and world music appeal, lead to a commercialization or dilution of traditional forms, meanings, and social functions? Or conversely, do these new avenues, recordings, international tours, online platforms, offer vital opportunities for preservation, for reaching wider audiences, for economic survival for artists, and even for creative innovation? There are no easy answers. For some, the ability to record an aging master griot is an invaluable act of preservation, capturing precious knowledge that might otherwise be lost. For others, the shift from performing for a specific community event with deep local meaning to performing on a concert stage for a foreign audience who may not understand the language or the cultural context inevitably changes the nature and purpose of the art. There's a constant tension between preserving what is seen as pure or authentic tradition and allowing for the natural evolution, adaptation, and individual creativity that has always been a part of these oral art forms. After all, the griot who first incorporated a story about encountering a train was also an innovator in their time. Moreover, while some griot musicians have achieved international fame, many traditional griots in West Africa still face significant economic challenges. The old systems of patronage have largely faded, and making a living solely through traditional community based performances can be difficult in a world of rapidly changing economies and social values. Some worry that younger generations, attracted by other career paths or modern globalized culture, may be less inclined to undertake the long, arduous training required to become a true master of the tradition. Yet, despite these challenges, the legacy of the West African griot remains profoundly important. They are far more than just charming storytellers or quaint relics of a bygone era. They represent an incredibly sophisticated system for preserving and transmitting knowledge, history, art, and cultural values through the power of the human voice and musical ingenuity. In a world increasingly dominated by fleeting digital information and short attention spans, the figure of the griot reminds us of the deep human need for narrative, for connection to our past, for understanding who we are and where we come from. Their role in maintaining cultural identity, social cohesion, and a sense of historical continuity is perhaps more vital than ever in many West African communities navigating the complexities of the modern world. And the universal themes found in their epics of heroism, justice, loyalty, the struggle against adversity, the importance of community, continue to resonate far beyond their original cultural context. The spirit of the griot, that dedicated keeper and eloquent sharer of stories, the one who ensures that the lessons of the past inform the present and inspire the future, lives on. It lives on in the music of their descendants, in the efforts of cultural preservationists, and perhaps in a small way, even in sessions like this one, where we take a little time to listen to the echoes of their ancient and powerful voices. They teach us that history is not just a collection of facts and dates, but a living stream carried forward by those who take the time to remember, to craft, and to share. And so, our exploration of the world of the West African griots, those remarkable living libraries and melody weavers, gently comes to its end for tonight. The vibrant echoes of the Kora, the resonant tales of ancient empires, and the enduring spirit of the storyteller now begin to soften, to recede into the quiet spaces of your mind. Let the images of bustling Saharan trade routes, the grandeur of royal courts, and the intimate village gatherings under starlit skies gently fade. Allow the complex rhythms and the profound voices to become a soft, distant murmur, like the last notes of a song drifting away on the evening breeze. There is no need to hold on to the names, the dates, or the intricate details of their craft any longer. You have journeyed with them, listened to their essence, and that is enough. Feel now a sense of deep calm settling over you, as peaceful as the savannah at dusk, after the heat of the day has subsided and a cool quiet descends. Let your thoughts become like feathers, light and unburdened, drifting slowly downwards towards a place of deep rest. Any lingering threads of the day's concerns can unravel now. Any tensions can release their hold as you allow yourself to sink more deeply into comfort and stillness. The stories have been told, the music has played, and now it is time for your own quiet interlude, a moment of pure, untroubled repose. Let the gentle cadence of your breath be your only guide, leading you softly, effortlessly into the peaceful realm of sleep. Good night.